Today's guest is Faye Allen, best-selling author of Building Women: How Everyone in Construction Can Win. All right, Faye, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, always like to hear stories of people that have done lots of different things in and around construction. I know you've worked with many different types of contractors, expertise on the financial side, and I guess you transitioned more into expert witness, litigation, all those things that come when you don't do things right. So, um, how did you originally get into the construction industry?
I blame my dad. So my dad was an estimator, so he used to price the jobs up. He used to take me to the yard when he worked for someone else when I was a little girl, and then he set up his own business. And I just got really interested in it when he took me out on a few jobs when I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And he was like, right, go and get trained with someone else. So I took on a training contract where I did 4 days working and then 1 day at college and then later university to get my qualifications. And yeah, I just really loved it because it's just so varied and no job's ever the same.
Yeah. I mean, I've interviewed two different types of people where they start early and they just keep going, and there's individuals that they get out of it and then they realize they like it, or they try other things and they come back to which were you?
Well, I've been doing this since I was 18, so it's over 30 years. And I think, even before that, a lot of my childhood, like I say, we'd do things with my dad, and sometimes it would be a family trip on a Sunday to deliver a tender. So it's sort of always been a big part of my life, I suppose. And I've done sort of the running the jobs bit, working as a surveyor on the projects. I've done procurement, I've done contracts, and now, like you say, I didn't really have jobs that got into dispute, but it's always something that really interested me. So I did do a postgraduate diploma in law, and then I thought, okay, let's sort of move into the expert witness world. And yeah, I did that after sort of about 21 years of working for different contractors. So it's given me a really good rounded experience. I know the tricks that contractors try and sort of play. So that does give you a bit of an advantage sometimes. But yeah, it's just really interesting, and I love the fact that no day's ever the same. Whether you're working on a project or whether you're doing dispute work, no day's ever the same. You can't get bored.
Yeah. I mean, what are some common stories or lessons you've learned? Because you have so many different roles in different capacities, or actually different companies. What are some
Mm.
memorable things, or like points where you think, hey, look, I really learned something, or, this was a horrible day. I don't know, whatever you're willing to share.
I've had a few really funny experiences over the years. I mean, I've had. I think when you're young, you often don't really know how to handle yourself, and I think things were very, very different 30 years ago to how they are now. And I was often the only woman, so there weren't any role models for me to look up to for quite a long time in my career because there just weren't women in the industry. So I kind of got used to having to just sort of rely on myself, or I had a couple of cheerleaders. One was my first boss, who, I love him dearly, and I'm still in contact with him today. And obviously my dad. And I think if it hadn't have been for them, I probably would have left because sometimes it was really difficult. I did get bullied quite a lot when I was younger. The harassment was quite difficult on site because, the trades didn't want you there. They were like, sort of, they weren't exactly polite about telling you to get lost, let's put it that way. And I think you had to grow quite a thick skin to stay in the industry as a woman. And then when I moved to weights, I remember that was the first time I had another woman as a role model, a lady called Maria Joyce. She actually came to my book launch recently, and she just made such a big impact on me because it was like, you can succeed. She really helped me to get chartered with the RICS. She really supported me and helped me get my postgraduate diploma in law. So that was my first experience of a role model who was obviously the same gender, but also showing me what good looks like. Because you do get sometimes when there's so few women, you can get women who are like, no, it was tough for me, so I'm going to make it hard for you as well. And I was really lucky that Maria was not like that. She was like not pulling that ladder up. She was like giving me a hand and telling me how to get up there with her, which I think was really, really just a big impact on me in my life. And I think it's really helped mold me into really supporting women. And well, I support everyone, but I think particularly for women because they're often in the minority, I really, really want to make sure that if I can help them, I will.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you know, you have a book, so we can talk about that. But before you do, what sort of motivated you to get into the law side of things, like, specifically?
I think it's something when I was at school, I always sort of had this thing of did I want to be an interior designer or a lawyer? And then obviously I went out with my dad and I ended up being a quantity surveyor. But I think even as a quantity surveyor, you put contracts together, you get the supply chain and you give them the contracts and you argue over clauses in those contracts. So you're quite involved in it anyway. And what I used to see, not so much on my projects, because I think I ran them in a way where if something was a problem, I would try and nip it in the bud very early. But you'd see on other projects and other companies that things would often end up in dispute and then loads of money gets spent. And I suppose part of it was like, can I avoid that by getting a little bit more of the legal experience? But also, the more I sort of learned about it, the more I thought actually it's quite interesting to get involved in those projects because you can't necessarily help people once they're in dispute, but you can make sure that the facts are the facts and that, you know, it's very clear and that I know as an expert, when I do expert work, obviously it's independent and your obviously duties to the tribunal. So it's not the same as when you're on site and you're having an argument over an account. It's basically here's the facts and this is what my opinion is and this is what I think it's worth. So I think that really appealed to me, just that side of it. So yeah, that's kind of what enticed me into doing the postgrad in law, and then yeah, later on, sort of getting into the expert witness work.
Sure. I mean, going at it first from when you were working directly with the contractor on the estimating side, I mean, what sort of common mistakes or things, avoidable mistakes, that contractors can focus on? Like, what were the preventable things that you noticed while you were doing that?
Yeah, I mean, and I talk about this quite a lot. I records, records, records. When you're on the job is probably the most important thing. So always keeping records. You want to know exactly who's on site, what they're doing. Photographic evidence really important because when I get stuff now, if I don't have the records, it's very difficult for me to help people. But I think before that, when you procure the work, and this is where a lot of surveyors and project managers work together to do that, you get people who are very keen on chucking everything, including the kitchen sink, in that contract, but they don't actually know what it is. It often has conflicting information. So it's really about making sure that you know exactly what you want and don't just throw everything in there for the sake of it. And it's a habit you do see from some big clients, unfortunately. They've got 50,000 different things that you have to follow and all these policies and procedures, and they will often not, I mean, we used to have contracts that could be boxes and boxes and boxes for some clients because they would want every single policy and procedure, and then they might have different clauses in the contracts and they'd be adding bits at the end, but that would conflict with something else in the contract. So it's really just put in there what's necessary because you want to get the job that you want. You don't want to have an argument. And I think what happens with some of these things is where there's conflict in the documents, that's where you get argument. Maybe having a hierarchy of documents, if you've got lots in there, is helpful as well, so that if something does happen, the parties know exactly what they're going to do. And I do see that on a lot of contracts. But I mean, for me, upfront, getting it right is so important. If you get it right in the contract, and if you've got there's a habit of picking the cheapest price still sometimes, and that also comes with its own problems. I always sort of used to say it's not about cheapest, it's about best value. And sometimes getting the best value isn't the cheapest price, it's actually maybe the one in the middle or even a higher one, but you'll get the job done. You'll get it done on the program that you want, and actually everyone walks away happy. I think you just see a lot of the time when people are squeezed for cash, and it does happen, and it's really unfortunate. That goes down through the entire supply chain, and we have to remember that the big contractor who has the project isn't the ones that are doing the work. and that squeeze goes all the way down, and it hits even that self-employed person that's just there with his trowel doing the bricklaying. So I think, there's a lot of it that you need to think about what is sensible rather than what is cheap. And I think that's something where you have to educate clients as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now going into like, being an expert witness, at that point, when you work with the company or the company brings you on, I mean, what is a good working relationship look like? Or how does the company make the most out of that working relationship with the expert witness? Like what can be done at that point in terms of, putting a best foot forward?
I mean, it depends how. I mean, if I've come on as an expert witness, a lot of the time my instructions will come from lawyers. So I'll have specific instructions as to what to do. And I will obviously keep lawyers in copy all the time because you're protecting privilege and making sure that everything is, clear and evidenced. But for me, when I'm working with clients, it's being very clear about what I need from them, because a lot of the time they don't know. They just know that they're in trouble, they've got a claim, and they're trying to fight. So for me, it's being really clear, request for information, giving them a really clear schedule. This is what I need. And I have people who've worked with me before, and they'll be like, oh, it's Faye. I know exactly what she's going to ask me for. So they now just automatically give it to me. So I think being really clear with people and just being upfront and honest. I'm not going to beat around the bush. If I think something's weak and that they're never going to get it, I will be honest. And I think that in itself brings repeat business, because they know that you're not just doing it to exhaust fees. They know that actually they're going to get the truth from you. And if I think I see something where they need to just give in because they're not going to have an entitlement to it, I will say that. And I think, when it goes to litigation, particularly, I will always be honest, but my duty is to the tribunal. So, there can be pressure with experts from parties to, do certain things in their report. And you have to be really strong and actually say, no, I'm not happy with that because that's not my opinion. And there's been a few cases about it recently where experts have got themselves in trouble. So it's really important that you just remember where your duty is. And it's different when you're doing mediations and other things. You can do things slightly differently. But I think particularly you have to remember, as an expert, your reputation is everything. And it doesn't take long to ruin a reputation. So it's just really important to stick with what the rules are, and remember your independence is really key.
Yeah, for sure. What just going back, you mentioned your book. At what point did you, come to a conclusion you wanted to write a book?
Oh,
What was the key?
it was a combination of things that happened. Um, the first thing that was probably the seed that started the thought was when the hashtag Me Too thing happened. And it was because I posted it on my personal Facebook page, because everyone in the world, all the women were going, hashtag Me Too. And it kind of blew up in my face because I'd never told anybody I'd been assaulted at work. So I think that really was like the seed was in my head, and I was thinking, I wonder how many other women this has happened to. And then the more I started speaking to women, the more I realized it wasn't just me. And then I was talking at London Build in 2020, and I was on a panel with some other women, and I had women of colour, I had women who were mothers, and I realised that they were having it even tougher than I was. And they were like 15, 20 years younger than me, and they were still having the same issues that I had. And I was like, something's got to change, because we've got a huge leaky pipeline of women in the UK. I've been tracking the Office of National Statistics stats for a number of years, and you see the numbers go up as we bring women in, and then you see them go down again. And that has been consistent for probably about 25, 30 years. So it's never gone above about 12.5% as an average. And the reason is because we lose women, and it's not when you think, it's not when they have babies. We lose women in their 40s. So that was backed up by the RICS statistics in one of their reports. And when I started speaking to women, it's just because it's so tough and they just get exhausted. And I thought, you know what, that it's got to change, because it's never going to get better if we don't make it better for women to be in the industry. And that was sort of when I thought, okay, I need to sort of try and work out how I'm going to do this. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to share those stories. So that's kind of how the idea started. And I joined a book writing group that was originally for women, with a lady called Lucy McCarraher. So she believed every woman has a book inside her. So I joined that group and started planning my book on coloured, like the cards that you use if you're doing a presentation. I had sort of all these cards and had them stuck with blue tack on a a thing in my office, and I sort of planned my book, and it took a long time because I had things happen in my personal life that sort of threw a spanner in the works. But eventually, I had this plan, which I had book coach help me with, and I had chapters and sub chapters, and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna write this book, and it was just a bit of a mammoth effort, and part of it was really doing the research to find out what was actually happening to women. So I did a big survey and I sent that out, and I sort of did a call on LinkedIn to women if they wanted to sort of get involved.
Yeah. And what
And
was the survey, the contents of the survey? Like some of
so
the points. What
it was a lot of questions. So some of them were, I mean, I wanted the basic ones, sort of age, how long people have been in the industry, what their background was. But then it was around, bullying, harassment, whether they'd been sexually assaulted, whether there was a gender pay gap, what had happened if they'd reported bullying. Because in the UK, we've had, and luckily the law's changing now, but we've had an issue where women get put on NDAs so they can't talk, and I got put on one myself in my career when I complained about bullying. So I knew it was a problem and I wanted to measure it. So when I asked the questions, it was also, has it happened in the last year, 5 years, 10 years, or longer? So I was trying to measure whether things had improved. And unfortunately, one of the statistics that came out of it, which was really horrendous, was that 30% of the women I surveyed had said they'd been sexually assaulted at work or on site. And that for me was just, yeah, that was a real fire in my belly to make sure that I did something to try and stop that.
Yeah. And is it about awareness? Like what are the strategies to make it better?
I mean, so I think what I realized when I started writing the book, because it was originally just going to be, these are women's stories, these are the problems, we need to fix it, is that actually a big part of fixing the problems is getting men involved as well. And when I started talking to men about, everyone talks about allyship, and a lot of men don't know what that is. They don't know why they should do it or how they should do it. And the more I spoke to men in the industry, the more I realised actually things aren't great for them either. So in the UK, we've got suicide statistics in construction that are 4 times the national average. So that made me really fiercely like, actually, this isn't just about women anymore. This is about making the industry better for everyone. So a large part of the book is about why having more women and fighting against the systems that we've already got will improve things for men as well. And then there's a big section of the book which really talks about allyship, what it is, how you can do it, right down into examples of what you can do. Because a lot of the men I spoke to were like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. You're telling me that women are having these horrible experiences. What do I do on a daily basis? And it can be as simple as, if you're in a meeting and a woman is being consistently spoken over, you could go, hold on there a minute, let Faye finish what she's saying. And it doesn't have to be done in a provocative way. It can be done in a really nice way. It doesn't have to be aggressive. And I think once men started to realize that, that's when they were like, okay, so now I know this stuff's happening. I also know I can do things to help, and actually by doing that, more women will come in, and actually the culture will change and be better for me. And I think there's a lot, not just on men as allies, but also treating men with the same respect that women need. So women have issues with flexibility around, they want to have babies, for example, and you can still have some sites that will be like, no, you must be here from 8 till 6. That doesn't work if a mum needs to take the kids to school. So why are we not offering flexibility not only to mums but also to dads, making it so that everybody can have that flexibility? And I do talk about some companies in the UK who've trialed it. It does work, but we need more people to take it up and feel comfortable with that. And I mean, some of the culture in the industry, unfortunately, means that, men who do that will often be bullied and told, what are you doing? That's a woman's job. And, it takes people with strength to actually parent out loud, which is what Elliot Ray talks about. I don't know if you've seen him on LinkedIn. So he's got a very big, um, it's just a brilliant sort of thing that he's doing, which is around men being able to parent and being treated well, given that flexibility, and how that actually helps not only them as parents, but also it helps the workplace. So, we reduce the gender gap if we didn't have women having to drop out for so long. And if we had this shared sort of maternity leave, there's all sorts of things we could do that would improve things for everybody. But I think we can be very stuck in old ways in construction. And I think it's really that's what made me want to get the book out there, because I think a lot of people, it gets talked about in pockets, but no one really brings it to a head. And I think what I've found as it started to sort of go out and create the ripple is that everyone who reads it has said nothing bad has been said about the book, which has been really relieving for me, obviously. But every review's been good. But all the men that have read it have been like, "Oh my god, didn't realise these were the issues." But wow, I know what I can do. They've almost picked the baton up and gone that I can actually do something and I can make a difference. And women are like feeling heard, which is really good, and it's creating conversations in all sorts of places, which is what's going to create hopefully the wave of change. Because I feel like there's a lot of people that now are on the right page and do want to make that change happen. It's just the stories and the truth's never really been spoken about. It's all been swept under the carpet and kept quiet with NDAs and compromise agreements. And, men just have to put up with how they're treated. Well, why should they? Why should they not have really good welfare facilities? Why should women not have PPE that fits them properly? These aren't difficult things. It's just that the industry has been so backward for so long.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing that you're doing. In terms of, you've written it, I've gone through the process, and when you were writing it, how involved was it? You said, I think you mentioned 4 years to do
Yeah,
it. Like, how
yeah.
involved were you? Hours a week? Because maybe someone's listening to it and say, "Hey, I have a story. I have something that I can share. I can relate to what you're saying, and I want to get stuff out there." How did it work for you?
I was quite unusual. So the book group that I joined with Rethink Publishing, who I eventually paid to help me publish, was very much on let's make this amount of time each day, and this is how you're going to do it. And I can't work like that. I'm one of those people. I need to immerse myself in it. So for me, it was very much weekends, evenings. Some evenings was more about research because I did an absolute ton of research. So my reading and research would be really during the week. Weekends would be blocked out for writing. And then I used all my annual leave for about 3 years. And I basically would go, my mum and dad had a place in France, and I would go and lock myself in that house on my own for like a week at a time. And I would literally just do nothing but write, 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 eat, sleep, and repeat. And that really is how I got a lot of it done, because I just need to be completely immersed in the process. I always sort of like picture myself, there's that film, isn't there, where they go to that lovely house and they're by the river and they're there for 3 months doing their book. If I could have afforded that, I would have done it, but I had to do it around a full-time job. So yeah, for me, I need time for my sort of creative juices to flow properly. So research evenings, and then yeah, writing was weekends and annual leave for sort of 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's wonderful. When you published it, now you're going out, you said the feedback was great. Are there things that you didn't expect, or things because being your first book, this is a new experience for you. What are some things that happened that are memorable or you didn't expect?
I think for me, some of it was because of some of the subject matter, particularly when I was speaking to women, probably the emotional effect it had on me as well. I felt the real weight of carrying all those stories, and not everyone can make it into the book. Obviously, I've spoken to over 1,000 women, and you can't possibly get all of that into one book. So for me, it was trying to get the stories out there that would help the industry, but also the weight of it. When I got to that very last chapter, that was probably the hardest one for me to write, because it's how do I express the thanks and the gratitude I have to those people for sharing their stories, and the emotional weight that I have felt of that in a chapter to finish the book.
Yeah.
It was
Well, because you want
really,
to do a
really
good job,
hard.
right? You want to do a
Yeah,
very good job.
and that's the thing. You've been trusted with their stories. Most of them are anonymous because they're difficult, and there are some that aren't, but most are because there are some very difficult experiences. But I think for me, the emotional toll was very, very hard. But then conversely, I spoke to people outside of industry because there's some really good things we can learn from others. So, for example, I've got the first Asian fighter jet pilot from the RAF here. I've got Mandy Hickson, so she's also a fast jet pilot in the RAF, ex pilot. I've got ex police, fire, rugby, football, you know, all sorts of different sectors, because there's things we can learn that will help us to be better. And no one's saying that those sectors are perfect, but there's some really good examples and people who've been through difficulties but managed to navigate it. And I really wanted, particularly for men, to sort of think there's something in this book that I want to read, because actually there's someone here that really interests me. So I've got, like, Lee Chambers, for example, wrote the foreword, and he was a beta reader and he's in the book because he does a lot on allyship. And for me, I respect his work a lot. And it was really, really important to have someone like that in the book to talk about, it is difficult. It's not easy being an ally. And there's men in there that say, you're going to make mistakes. And women know that. I surveyed women, and I think it was 67% were like, we know people will make mistakes. And if the intention is good, we have no issue with that. And I think men need to know that. And I think also I'm quite sort of hot on women can also be allies to other people, whether it's men or anyone else. I think we have to actually remember that a lot of the issues we've got are cultural, and it means we all need to take responsibility for just being kinder to each other, because it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But actually, that is where a lot of the problems are, just where people just don't think. And I think once things are brought into people's awareness, they suddenly then go, oh my God, I was doing that all the time. I didn't know.
Yeah. And we're all capable of doing something to contribute.
Yeah. And, I always say every day's a school day. We're always learning. I'm not the same person today that I was yesterday, and I won't be the same tomorrow. And I think if we all thought like that, we would grow a lot faster. So my hope really is when people pick the book up, they learn stuff, but they also then go, do you know what? It's a challenge now to go out and continue that learning. And it's been really interesting reading some of the reviews as they've come in, because some of the different things that people pick up from the book, it just surprises me, but it also makes me really happy, because it's like I wouldn't have thought that that would be what someone would have got out of it. So, every reader gets their own journey through the book, and I made it conversational. So it's almost like we're having a conversation. So although there's difficult stories and statistics and stuff, I really wanted it to be easy to read and digest. And obviously it has been, because the reviews have been good. But I am going to record the audio book as well, because I think I just want it to be inclusive for people on site and trades who, they don't have time necessarily to read a book, but they might listen to it on the way in on the car. So yeah, it's just trying to make it get out there and hit the people that, we can really make a difference to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned making an audiobook, which is certainly a next phase. But what else is next? Now that you've done this, it was a big task. Is it to take a deep breath, enjoy it, or are you on to the next thing?
It's a combination, because I've just moved job as well. So I've just moved to a new firm, but I'm also getting more involved in speaking about this stuff in industry, because I think it's really important now that the sort of the ripples happening. It can't stop. It's no good just doing the book and then not talking about it anymore. So I mean, I've done various articles and what have you, but yeah, speaking on at different events, big and small, and just trying to really get people to think a little bit differently, because that's really where the change will happen. It doesn't necessarily have to be massive, but one company might be at an event and they hear me say something, and then they go away and do something completely different, and it makes a difference to all those people. And really, that's the mission. It's just, there's some really good companies out there, but there's also some appalling ones. but some of them just don't know what they don't know. So it's really about education for me. So it's a combination of holding down the full-time job and loving what I do, but also this is my passion to make it better for everyone in the industry, really.
Yeah,
And it
wonderful.
does, it links in to, I'm on the global steering committee for the ERE pledge, so that's the equal representation for experts. So one of the problems we have, particularly with experts in construction, is we just don't have that many women with the experience needed to become an expert. So for me, I need to plug that leak that we've got behind there so that I've got more women coming through, because that's, you know, that's really the ultimate, is to try and get to a place of parity.
Great. Is there anything I haven't asked you but you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I mean, for me, it's just, I just feel like with our industry's hard enough without, you know, people suffering. And I think anybody who is, I think, just really, really reach out to others, because we know that mentally there's a lot of issues with mental health statistics in the industry. It's hard. And I think, you know, we just need to be better at enabling people to have those conversations. And I think just remembering just to think about how others are experiencing life, really, because we all experience it differently, and what you don't know now you may well know tomorrow, and you will do things differently as a result.
Sounds great. Well, Faye, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.